Sunday. Welcome to today's live. I have a fabulous guest, Dr. Stephan Esser from Esser Health, and he'll be here to tell you some great things and what's going on in Florida and with just the world. And he's just so inspiring. You might have seen him on the Truth About Weight Loss Summit. And he's just a wonderful plant-based doctor, a wonderful person. And we're going to give you some links where you can connect with him more on Facebook and on Instagram. You know, I only follow about 50 people on Instagram, and he is my favorite. He's one of the only doctors that actually posts pictures of all his meals. It's very, very inspiring. And if you have any questions for him, of course, you can ask them. This is the first time you're seeing me, basically I've been going live once a day or more since the sheltering in place took hold, just to create a sense of community and connection. So thank you so much. I see Andrea's here. When you say hi, we love it, but also say where you're from, like Andrea is from Florida, where Dr. Esser's from, because that's how we're connecting people. So thank you so much for being here on a Sunday, Dr. Esser. How are you?
I am excellent, and I'm delighted to be able to join you, Chef AJ.
I hear the birds singing, and people have saying that now with the sheltering in place, we can actually hear the birds sing.
It's a beautiful thing. You know, if anything good has come out of this, it's certainly people being forced to stop a little bit and take a little bit more evaluation of their own personal lives and also the world around them, and hopefully to appreciate more of the beauty and wonder and just the special things that surround us every day that we take for granted.
Right. Now, are you still working or doing telemedicine? Because every doctor and every specialty in every city is affected a bit differently.
That's right. I'm still seeing patients full-time in clinic, and I'm also doing telehealth or video medicine for those people who are uncomfortable coming to the clinic. So we're busy and delighted to help people.
Right. Now, being in Florida, are you able to do telehealth with people outside of Florida or only within Florida?
That's a really good question. I'd have to look at the different insurers. You know, I think they each have different specifics, but yeah.
Right. Well, in case someone isn't familiar with you, what is your specialty?
Yeah, so my actual training and specialty is I'm a doctor of physical medicine and rehabilitation with a fellowship in sports medicine. So I did my medical school, University of South Florida, then I went to Harvard for a residency in PM&R, where I went there because I really wanted to work with the Institute of Lifestyle Medicine, which is a great organization up there. And then I ended up coming to Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida to do a sports medicine fellowship, and I've stayed here ever since. I of course, am a fourth generation plant-based eater. And, you know, my grandfather ran a big health ranch for 65 years in Florida. So coming back to the Sunshine State was always in the plans. So delighted to have found a special place to come home to.
Right. Talk a little bit about, you know, we have some people that are so young, they don't remember your grandfather. Talk a little bit about who he was, because it's really fascinating that you were raised the way you were. I remember once you told me when you were a little kid and you had a flu, they just fasted you, you know, they
That's right. That's right. I mean, so my grandfather was one of the founders of the National Health Association, what used to be called the National Hygiene Society. And really the belief principles that underpinned this were that the human body had an amazing potential for health when you gave it the right elements. And those were, of course, excellent nutrition, good exercise, sleep, emotional poise, clean water, and the avoidance of toxins, and a little bit of sunlight. And really what we're seeing now in the science on an international level is that those basic principles are validated again and again for the majority of human diseases. And so he and a bunch of, you know, forward-thinking individuals founded this organization, and then he set up shop back in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and then continued to run his place in South Florida all the way until he was in his 90s. And so it's pretty cool to grow up there. You know, 30 people at a time lived on 10 acres of land, and they reversed diseases through food, through therapeutic water fasting, juicing, etc. And what we know about most viral illnesses is that most of them have a prodrome. You talked a little about me getting any little childhood illnesses. And a prodrome is a period where you just don't feel well. You start getting little aches and pains, a little snotty nose, something's not right, a little maybe light temperature. And most Americans, unfortunately, they reach for the pill jar. So they go for the Tylenols, the anti-inflammatories, the NSAIDs, as we call them, et cetera. And if you've seen any of my posts on Instagram or Facebook recently, I've been putting all these studies that demonstrate these anti-inflammatories actually inhibit your immune system from working at its prime. And so nevertheless, when you get that little prodrome, if you just shut things down, rest, sleep, some nice green juice to bring down all the blood sugars, or even just therapeutic water fasting, in a day or two, you feel great and the body's taking care of business. You get this beautiful upregulated immune response, good antibody production progress. And for the majority of cases in these little viral illnesses, things just pass on by. So it's The body is amazing when you give it the tools that it needs.
But do you think that would be effective even now with this virus, that people should take it upon themselves if they have what you call the prodrome? Because people can be sick without having COVID-19. There's other flus, there's other things, but people are very scared right now.
They are, and I think one of the things I've tried to be is a voice of reason on the internet right now, because there's a lot of mass hysteria going on. And I think what we really need to be doing is looking for the data. And the data so far was not present over the last number of weeks and even months to really make us feel one way or another 100%. But now the data is coming out more and more, like a recent study just published out of Stanford, right, out of Santa Clara, in which they looked at tens of thousands of people and are identifying that really the mortality risk of this disease process appears far more like a flu, a seasonal flu, than it does like some horrific thing like smallpox. So what we all should be doing every day, all day, is enhancing our overall health on every level. And we shouldn't wait for a pandemic. We shouldn't wait for some horrible thing to happen before we go, oh my gosh, I've got to take care of myself now. Because the reality is there's a quote pandemic of chronic diseases going on every day. So in the time that 39,000 people have died in America in the last 6 months from quote COVID, 600,000 people have died of heart disease, diabetes, cancer-related deaths, so on and so forth, and common pneumonias. So we really need to get back to what's most likely to kill each of us, right? And every 37 seconds, someone dies of a heart attack, and really focus on what we can do about that. And what's really neat is the data says the same thing. The lower our, for example, body mass index, the lower chronic inflammation, the lower chronic disease risk we have, the lower risks we have for uncommon things like SARS, MERS, coronavirus, et cetera, and also the common things like heart disease and diabetes.
Right. I think though sometimes people get scared because you don't really catch diabetes and heart disease from somebody, and that they're worried about this unknown factor of how it's transmitted. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And I think, two pieces on that. One is it makes sense to either A, avoid people who are sick, B, if you yourself are unwell, of course, avoid other people and follow those principles of good hygiene. And secondarily, though, is we want to remember that just being exposed to a viral particle does not mean you will have a disease process from it. And that's what the new studies, the antibody studies, are clearly showing. Lots of people, 80-90%, have no significant effect from even this coronavirus itself. So I think what's crucial is that we're all focused on upregulating our immune systems to work at peak, regardless of whether it's a coronavirus that comes back in the winter or just for general flus, colds, sniffles, et cetera. And that's really going back to the basics. It's, are you getting enough sleep, right? Are you getting excellent plant-based nutrition? Are you maintaining a good body weight? Are you getting your exercise to enhance respiratory function? All of these key essentials, because at a time when things feel out of control in your life, it's so crucial to take back what you do have control over, right? And so making sure that you're really setting yourself up for excellent success across the board.
Right. Well, I've got some nice comments. Bonnie saying, I love Dr. Esser. Sherry says, he's too young to be a doctor. Well, that's because I think it's because partly his lifestyle and how he was raised. But we do have a few doctor type questions, like Belinda says, but isn't COVID more contagious than the flu?
It does appear to be slightly more contagious. Now, the challenge is we don't fully have the numbers, right? So a lot of the data that came out, so you want to remember, so for example, the Italian data that was coming out is very imperfect. So anybody who died who also had positive COVID testing was considered positive for coronavirus death, even if they died of a heart attack, but they were also positive for, COVID-19. And so the problem was in Italy, you want to remember, they have 3 times fewer per capita ICU beds as compared to the US, for example. And so anybody who came to the hospital who had even low, mild to moderate, coronavirus symptoms, they would admit. So now you're filling up the hospitals with all these positive patients, even if they're not significantly ill, which increases the amount of viral particles all through the hospital, increasing the likelihood of people getting sick from it, et cetera. So you just created a contagious environment, period. Plus, let's face it, let's be honest. I've worked in a lot of hospitals. You know how the food is in hospitals? Horrific, absolutely immune compromising, absolutely detestable. And so all these poor people are coming to these hospitals, high quantities of viral particle present, a compromised immune status, horrible oxygenation in these rooms, right? I mean, just recircled air, resurfaced air, et cetera. I mean, really a bad environment and chronically ill and unwell people. But long story short is we took that data from Italy and some of these other places saying how much more contagious it is, but is it really accurate? Because now when we're beginning to look, even in Santa Clara, it's only 4% of the population actually had antibodies to this. Yet if all these people, 50,000, 85,000 are running around, well, shouldn't there be tons more sick people? Right? So is it really that contagious as we think? The data is really not here yet. So we need more data before we can make these definitive claims. And what's really interesting, if you look at the New England Journal of Medicine, they posted an article not too long ago, actually published by Dr. Fauci, right, who's in the media all the time, and in which he said the same thing. He said he expects this to be far more of a slightly more potent seasonal flu, and that's what he expects. And I'm not sure that's getting translated well when he gets on CNN or on these other places, but the actual peer-reviewed articles that he's published, that's exactly the quote. It's on my Instagram if people want to go look at the actual article right there.
Yes, and I've been posting for people to please, guys, follow Dr. Esser on Instagram. It's his name plus the word health, Esser Health, and I'll keep posting it, and also on Facebook. And I'm posting the link right now to that. So what you're saying, we have a question because you're talking about was just a little bit more deadly of a flu. The question from Jesse then is it mainly the comorbidities that are killing the people who get COVID-19?
That appears to be all the data we have so far. So you look at the Chinese data, the Italian data, and most recently the New York data, all of which are posted on my Instagram. And you can see that the data that's presented shows very clearly if you are having multiple comorbidities, most prominent amongst these actually. So first of all is age, that's out of our control, right? But that's a chronologic factor, but not all aging is chronologic. There's also physiologic aging, right? I have 40-year-old patients who are hypertensive, diabetic, obese, et cetera. If you look at them at a physiologic level, their level of inflammation is like an 85-year-old who's been a smoker, right? I mean, it's just horrific. So they are aged before their prime. And so when we look at the data out of New York that looked at 5,000 COVID deaths, they showed that age and obesity were the two biggest risk factors. Now remember, obesity itself is the #1 risk factor for hypertension, type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, on and on and on, right? All these other risk factors. So the big risk factors, I did a whole video on this on Facebook and Instagram where I went through each piece of the data. Really, yeah, high blood pressure, heart disease, hypercholesterolemia, liver disease, kidney disease, obesity, et cetera. All of these, and listen carefully, right? All of those increase inflammation at the cellular level and result in an impairment of your immune system. So obesity by itself, remember, is a low-level state of inflammation. So your visceral fat is constantly releasing pro-inflammatory cytokines that impair your immune system from working. This was known clearly 10, 20, 50, 30 years ago when we had SARS, when we had MERS, when we have H1N1. Again, all these studies are put out there on my Instagram and Facebook. You'll just see them. They're not studies I did. They're all the experts in epidemiology and infectious disease that showed that if you were obese, you had higher rates of disease, higher rates of severity of disease, higher risk of being admitted to an ICU, put on a ventilator, and higher risk of death, all just because of your weight. So that's why today is the day, folks, to do exactly what Chef AJ says and start hitting these high micronutrient dense, calorie poor foods that just result in radical, rapid weight loss, reduction of inflammation, and immediately bring down all the excess fluid that you're retaining that is just also just creating an environment of illness and sickness.
Yeah, it's just that some people are, instead of using this downtime to get healthy, are stressed and anxious and turning to junk food.
Yes, and that's why I'm here to just say to you, #1, stress has no place in your life right now. Because if you just look at the stats and the data, overwhelmingly, this is a disease of extraordinarily ill and unwell people. And if that's you, if you fall in that category, this is not the time for stress. This is the time for action, my friends. This is the time to hit it right now, because every meal that you eat, every bite on the tip of your fork either upregulates or downregulates your immune system, either increases inflammation or decreases inflammation, either increases blood pressure or brings it down. So it's crucial that you take back your power, which is right now. Because the reality is the food is powerful medicine for this disease, as well as for the majority of other diseases that are most likely, again, to kill you.
Wow. So we have another comment, love Dr. Esser, from Leslie. And we had two questions, one from Bonnie and one from, it just is going so fast, this feed. What is Dr. Esser's suggestion for the healthiest BMI?
I tend to stay right in and around where that science is, right? Anywhere from kind of 18 to 24, 17 to 24, somewhere in there. Is there an absolute, this is what you should be? No, because we know BMI is an imperfect number. It is not perfect, but it's a good place to start, right? And waist hip circumference is another great, right, place to look. But let's face it, let's be honest with each other. You look in the mirror, most of us, and we can tell if we're carrying extra weight or not, right? You just look in the mirror, you're like, yep, carrying a little extra. Now, if you have struggled with an eating disorder, right, or disordered sense of self, right, well, then it's important that you have some outside source, some independent, right, physicians kind of taking a look at you and giving insight. BMI is imperfect, but it's a good place to start.
Nice. Jan wants to know if the virus can live in a dead person.
So I think once the person is completely dead and cold and there's nothing left there, I'm not really, obviously in the human secretions, there may be some viral particles, how, risky they are, et cetera. I have no idea. And I don't know that anybody knows that. That's a good question.
Right. Talia says, Dr. Esser was my favorite speaker in the Truth About Weight Loss Summit. And Suzanne wants to know, has he said yet that motion is lotion?
I'll say it for you. Motion is lotion. There you go.
Yeah. Victoria says, Dr. Esser, some experts say you need to add extra protein to upregulate the immune system. What do you think of that?
So I think that protein, just as a basic building block in the molecule for overall health, is valuable and important, right? Just like carbohydrates are, just like fats are, et cetera. We need all of those in our diet. As far as is there a specific amount of protein that is required in order to maximize your immune function right now? I don't believe that. No, I don't think there's specifically strong data to support that. I think what we should all be focusing on are two or three things. Number one is it's not just about the macronutrients. It is about the micronutrients. And this is where it's so essential you come back to what the data says. This is not about calories in, calories out for most people when it comes to human health. Calories are essential because you need a certain amount to survive. But what is even more valuable than those calories is going to be the micronutrients you get. So look on my Instagram and Facebook, you're going to see all these articles I've recently put up there on polyphenols and bioflavonoids and these little micronutrients nobody even knows the name of or barely knows the name of that appear to significantly influence cellular function and immune function. So this is where I put up a little comment the other day and I said, food is cellular information, right? Or food is information at the cellular level. That's crucial. You remember that. So if you're eating a well-balanced, brightly colored, plant-based program with adequate total calories for your height, weight, and exercise level, you're probably getting enough protein and you don't have to worry about that.
Right. Nice comment about your haircut. Wondered if your wife did it.
I just did it about 20 minutes ago, actually.
Oh my God.
But yes, my wife is very capable as well, but I did this one.
It looks great. So this is an interesting question about, are you telling you how you move from Robin. Please tell us how you and your wife are giving over COVID-19 education to your own small children and how we should be keeping young kids calm throughout this present environment.
I think crucial is probably for your children to avoid all mass media outlets, right? Because right now, this is interesting. I was listening to somebody talk the other day. They made a good point, right? So if we said 600,000 people died in the last 6 months in America alone from multiple different conditions, imagine if there was a tally going on the internet or on your television every day somebody else died, right? Imagine if every 37 seconds right now on Chef AJ's thing, it popped up, a little heart went up, a bleeding heart. And that was the next person who had a heart attack, right? Every 37 seconds. How would that make you feel? You start feeling stressed and you'd feel overwhelmed and your cortisol levels would start climbing and you'd be freaking out of your mind. But really, when we say, all right, 39,000 people have died in the last 6 months from, quote, coronavirus, well, 600,000 people have died in America in the same amount of time of all kinds of various other causes, including over 15,000 from just car accidents, right? So this is essential, right? 8,000 people die every day in America. That is just what happens. And so we need to recognize, this is this really, first of all, as scary as it's being made out to be, or is this mass hysteria that is just growing and growing and growing? So until we have really good data that says one way or another, which so far the data seems to suggest it is not as dangerous as people would, like to think, we need to at least allow those who can't think through this clearly to keep them away from the mass media, away from the hysteria, because otherwise, it creates fear, and it's very hard for the young ones, for them to absorb this and make sense of it and to think through it. My wife said something the other day. She goes, I know that I tend toward a little more anxious personality, and she goes, if I didn't have you in the home, I would be constantly anxious and fearful about what's going on. If I didn't have you to break down the science and walk through it with me and go, no, this is an extraordinarily low risk. I mean, remember what the Chinese data even showed? It showed that if you were under the age of 50 something, right? Let's start there. And you had no comorbidities at all, right? No obesity, no hypertension, et cetera. Your risk of dying was like nil. Like it didn't even exist, essentially. It wasn't even worth talking about. And the more comorbidities you added, the higher your risk became, right? So yes, I mean, as far as our daughter is concerned, our family, our children are concerned, we have continued with a positive, fun, playful life, growing the garden, making birdhouses, education as usual. And, I think that, again, for the majority of people, the majority of places, this will be a non-event if we survive this financially, right?
Right.
That's the challenge.
You're speaking as a medical doctor who really understands how to look at the data. And I've had two psychologists interview, Dr. Hawk and Dr. Lyle, and some people are actually getting angry with them because they feel like they're not taking it seriously, but people don't understand how to analyze the data, like, the statistics like you guys.
Right. Yeah, and that I think creates even greater fear and anxiety. I mean, I think so. This is what I encourage people. I say, look, if you know yourself, and if you don't know yourself by now, it's time to get to know yourself. Do you tend toward an anxious perspective, a slight paranoia? Because let's face the reality: if we've survived, our genetics, right, probably came from somebody who's a little more paranoid. As I jokingly like to say, right, the people who are like, hey, let's go dance in the moonlight back in primeval days, they got eaten by the dinosaurs, right? But the people who said, quick, hide in the cave and let's stay here and we'll be safe, they passed on their genetics to us. So we got more of those anxiety prone, paranoid perspectives, and that's okay. But if you tend to be a little more on the spectrum of anxiety, you need to stay off the internet right now. You need to stay, unless you're just going to Chef AJ's site, or if you're going, to my Instagram or Facebook, but you need to stay away from all the big sites. I mean, it's crazy to me because I look at the data and then I go on CNN or Fox or wherever, and I just see like one hysteric thing after the other of like more people dead and this is happening. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is not what is being validated based on the science that is now existing. Why are they doing this? And I'm a little unsure why they're doing it. I don't know.
Yeah. Lita's saying that fear and anxiety are not good for the immune system. I never watch the news, and I certainly am not watching it now. So
Right.
that's for sure. Let's see. I got a comment here and a question. Sorry about that. It's just I see it and then it goes so quickly
Oh, you're great.
that so yeah, I just wanted to ask you, are in Florida where you live, is there a sheltering in place order and a wearing mask outside as well, or it's different in every state?
So yeah, it's different in every state. And in our state at the present time, actually they're beginning to liberalize everything. So for example, our present city, Jacksonville, just opened up all the beaches, opened up all the parks, and to get people outdoors, et cetera, which again is valid with the research that exists. So if you look, the data so far would suggest high heat, high humidity environments decrease the transmissibility of coronavirus. And the worst place you can be is in your house, sitting there, sucking in recycled air that's cool, and watching scary things, or wasting your life on Netflix and eating junk food, right? I mean, that's the worst place you can be. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, because of the CDC recommendations, I think more and more people are wearing masks, and that may be a positive thing to do. The challenge just is the data is not 100% there to support it. And so, again, I'm not here to be an iconoclast. I'm here to follow, appropriately where we should. But also to make sure that we're asking the right questions. And then in the midst of this, we're remembering something. Wearing a mask and staying in your home is only one part of an equation. The other key part to this is upregulating your immune system, because this is not some weird, funky disease that kills everybody. And if you get it, everybody gets sick. That is not it at all. The studies clearly demonstrate the better your immune system is, the healthier you are, the lower your risk of anything from this. And that is why this is absolutely essential that we're talking the two parts to this. Avoid high viral loads and exposure, number one, and two, upregulate your immune system. But stop with fear, because as one of your viewers said, we know that anxiety and panic and fear upregulates cortisol, right? Which inhibits the immune system and drives down the immune system itself. It puts you in that fight or flight response where now your body can't even do what it needs to do.
Right. And Netflix, junk food, animal products are not good for the immune
Ah,
system, not good for anxiety. So
nope.
Gina says, I'm not hysterical, but are the fewer deaths because we've been sheltering in place?
There's no data. That's the challenge. So here's the problem. If you really look at some of the big epidemiologists around the world, those in Stanford, a couple guys in Germany, et cetera, who are putting everything out publicly, they say the normal response with a viral infection that's new that comes out is 2 weeks of illness with a peak and then 2 weeks of decline because people begin to get herd immunity. So whether or not truly the hide in place, shelter in place, physical distancing, et cetera, was the answer or not, we won't ever really know, will we? Except for those countries that may have chosen not to, prefer that. So, for example, Sweden has been a little bit more liberal, right? Keeping their primary and secondary schools open and a few other things. So they may be an example to look at as the, years go by. But, who knows? That's the challenge because we chose this route. And, was it really needed? I'm not sure. I'm not, I can't tell the future. Yeah.
Great. I had a really good question, and I apologize that it sometimes goes quickly. So I'll ask this other one first that I see. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this one because it's not really in your specialty, but I'll say it anyway. From Nancy, what about someone who has had gastric bypass surgery? Can they absorb nutrients as well as needed? 11 years out and having a hard time losing weight. I've kept most of it off, but not lost as much as I should have. I've lost 96 pounds, but have 50 pounds to lose. Do you know anything about
I
gastric
do,
bypass?
absolutely. One of the things with gastric bypass that's a major concern, a lot of individuals have malabsorptive processes for the rest of their lives. So you want to remember, it depends on how much of the foregut. So remember your whole, quote, gastrointestinal tract starts in the mouth, goes to the esophagus, goes to the stomach, goes to the small intestines, goes to the large intestines. So different surgeries do different amounts of harm, if you will, to that intestinal tract to make it smaller, to make a person feel fuller sooner. And so it depends on the amount of intestine that is removed that can significantly influence the absorption of various vitamins, nutrients, as well as total calories. So yes, you can end up with some major and significant problems long term. And that's where it's very important to follow up on B vitamin status and then also the fat soluble vitamins, the A, D, E, and K, and really make sure that you're getting what your body needs. In addition, following a program like Chef AJ recommends, I think is right up your alley to maximize continued weight loss, because that will occur as a result of an excellent nutritionally rich program.
Right. It's just hard because their stomach has been made
Correct.
so small mechanically to eat those large volumes of food like you and I eat.
That's right. That's right. And that is honestly why I am not a fan of gastric bypass. I'm not a fan of that. I think for two reasons I would tell you, right? Number one is because it is essentially saying to a patient, you're out of control. The only person who can fix you is me, is the doctor. And that is completely, forgive my French, BS. The patient is the powerful one. They are the one who have all this control and all this authority. We want to give it back to them, help empower them so they can make intentional long-term decisions that validate their power, not saying you're out of control. The only thing that can help you is me cutting your stomach. That does not empower the individual. So number one, from a psychological perspective, I do not think it is the right choice. Number two is because of all of the risk factors I mentioned, short gut syndrome, obviously ongoing risk of adhesions and bowel perforations, a whole host of other things that can occur in the literature. So the people who are pro surgery on average are surgeons, right? And so it's unfair, right? Because they're the ones who are most likely to validate themselves, make money from it, et cetera. So there's some people in the plant-based movement, I won't say their names, who are also bariatric surgeons. And I think it's hard, right? Because they make their living from that. So most plant-based physicians do not drive Maseratis and you know what I mean, from selling plants. That's the reality. And so if they want to live this physician's life, they have to do procedures that are not, they're somewhat in conflict, I would argue. Yeah.
Can I get an amen to that? I love what you said. Most the people that are recommending surgery are surgeons, of course, and that's very, very profound. I love that you're making the patient the locus of control with what you're saying instead of the doctor, because yeah, once you're cut, you can't undo it, unfortunately.
Correct. And the reality is, let's face it, most individuals who enter into a vicious cycle of food addictions come from a place in which they felt out of control, right? And they're seeking some level of control with that food. They're seeking dopamine. They're right, whether it be a sexual abuse scenario when they were a child, whether it be some other harm to their psyche that left them really dopamine poor. And now they're seeking that dopamine at every bite. And before they know it, now they're just spiraling into a more vicious place that leaves them more out of control. And so they're seeking help. But what they really need, they need your guidance, Chef AJ, right? They need doctors like me to encourage and motivate and support them. And unfortunately, what all too often they get is, well, yep, you tried your best. Sorry that didn't work. Now let's just, mutilate you.
Right.
Well, yeah, because you can't control yourself. Yeah.
It doesn't change their psychology and it doesn't change their behavior.
Right.
And if they
Right.
want to be inspired, Josh Lajani, he was over 400 pounds and was
Right.
considering gastric bypass. And
Yeah.
so obviously, if you had it, we're not trying to make you feel bad. There's nothing you can do about it. We're
Right.
trying to help people that are considering it to
Correct.
maybe try what we're suggesting, which is
Right.
a nutrient-rich, calorie-dilute, whole food, plant-based diet,
Absolutely.
preferably with no SOS, but if you have the sugar and salt, as little as possible. So we
Right.
have, it says Dr. Esser is a ray of sunshine. Absolutely. Now, Susan says that she's 75. She eats like us, by the way. If I have to go to the hospital and I don't want to be ventilated, are there good oxygen options? And it's still not clear at what point one should actually go to the hospital or treatment.
Here's what I tell people right now. Again, as you already know my past, I'm a fourth generation plant-based eater. I've seen tens of thousands of people in my career, and even before that, as a kid, playing in the mulberry groves at my grandfather's ranch. And what I've learned is the following. If you are following an incredibly excellent nutritional program and lifestyle of whole food, plant-based nutrition, exercise, sleep, blah, 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 and you begin to get some significant problem, you need to have that evaluated. It is not that you're going to sit around, because if you're that healthy and taking that good of care of yourself and something goes south, you need to get it addressed, right? So I, for example, have some folks that I've known over the years. Let's say they began to have gastrointestinal pain. It just didn't go away. And they watched it for months and months and months. And now here they were suddenly diagnosed with metastatic, colon cancer everywhere. Because don't forget, we live in an imperfect, broken, fallen world, right? And so death will come for us all and things can happen no matter how well you take care of yourself. But that's not nihilism. That's just stating the fact that when we look, the common causes of death and disease will be completely eradicated and prevented in your life if you're doing what we say, that plant-based program, et cetera. However, the uncommon diseases can still occur, right? Weird toxins you were exposed to, things that happen to you, these still can occur. So in the case that you begin to have significant fevers, begin to have any sort of respiratory compromise, right? Difficulty breathing, chest pain, and all these things, you need to be evaluated. So hopefully you've got a good primary care physician who respects your healthy nutrition program, and you can reach out to them and say, hey, can I do a Zoom conference, right? A telemedicine, whatever, or can I see you in person, right? And get my lungs evaluated, et cetera. But yes, you don't want to go to the hospital if you don't have to, because obviously that's a less than ideal place for well people. So a little bit of a fever, a little bit of malaise, a little bit of a cough, not a big deal. You begin to have difficulty breathing, more shortness of breath, more lethargy, meaning you're just fatigued, and et cetera. You need to get evaluated, get a good chest x-ray, make sure you're not developing a pneumonia, things of that kind.
Wow. Tony wants to know, how does fasting affect your immune system?
So if you look at the data on fasting, it shows that especially short-term fasting upregulates immune function. And this makes total sense. Why? Because true fasting, which should be physiologic rest of the whole person, allows your body to use all of its nervous system energy and all of its stored resources for healing. Now, don't get me wrong. The person who says, well, I'm going to do 3 days of fasting while digging ditches at my job, right? Or while out playing tennis every other day, that's not fasting. That's not eating any calories and beating your body up. And what we should be doing is complete physiologic rest. So the early fasters, the guys who used to, and girls who used to fast thousands of people, right, would even force people to stay in bed, right? Only to get up to use the bathroom, otherwise rest completely. And so what we're looking for, though, with true fasting is complete physiologic rest, allowing your body to care for itself. So if you're not overly compromised, then your body has the ability, especially short-term fasting, 2, 3, 5 days, et cetera, to upregulate immune system, to make things more heightened in its awareness, and for it to pursue disease in your body. But if you're already very compromised in your health, like I said, bad pneumonia with severe fevers everywhere, can't breathe, that's probably not exactly the time to fast. But a little bit of a cold, a little sniffle, that's a perfect time to fast for a day and then do some green juicing and move forward. If you're on medications like blood pressure medicines, anti-seizure medicines, things like kind, blood thinners, fasting is not for you. And if you've never fasted, you should always have somebody supervise you rather than just jumping right in and say, oh, I'm not going to eat for a couple days, see how it goes. That's a great way to end up passing out because you're on 3 blood pressure medicines and your blood pressure dropped. You end up in the ER and people blame the fasting. No, not really. I mean, those are poor choices.
Right, that's right. Medical supervision. There's wonderful places
Yeah.
like the True North Health
True North
Center in
Health.
Santa Rosa.
Right.
There is the Fasting Escape in Yorba Linda. We know that
Right.
Balance for Life is closed right now in Florida, so
Right.
we were supposed to be together for my
I
60th
know
birthday.
it.
So we're celebrating now. So there's a question on PRP. So before I ask the question, maybe you could explain what PRP is.
Sure. Orthobiologics is a field of medicine that focuses on trying to heal your body using its own cells. So there are about 3 different areas of cells we use, either bone marrow derived stem cells, or fat derived stem cells, or platelets. So let's say you cut yourself. What's the first thing that happens? Your blood rushes there, the little platelets rush there, and these little tiny cells cause clotting. But after they clot the area, they release 60 different types of growth factors that then cause proteins to grow across and your wound to heal. So platelet-rich plasma, or PRP, is where we take your blood. Let's say we took a big amount of it. Only 2% of that entire blood is platelets. But what we do is we take all the plasma, the water out, we take the red blood cells out, and we're left with this little rich cocktail of growth factors. That's PRP. And we use that platelet-rich plasma to try to improve cellular health in joints, tendons, ligaments, and the like.
Nice. The specific question on PRP was if you had a shingle, let me find it again. It goes so fast. From Heidi was, how long after a shingle outbreak and the spots are gone, is it okay to get facial PRP in the same area without it causing another outbreak?
I would wait at least 8 weeks before I would do anything else there. And again, an excellent whole food, micronutrient rich, program to make sure that that immune system has come down, all the magnesium rich, B vitamin rich foods.
Nice. Leslie wants to know if she'll drive to South Carolina to Jacksonville, can she be your patient? Are you accepting new patients?
We are accepting new patients. I'm also happy to try to, set up, telemedicine, things of that kind, if need be. So I don't want you to get stopped at state lines.
Especially right now.
Right.
Bonnie says she's like scared to go to the grocery store. It's causing her anxiety that the virus. Well, first of all, you can get your groceries delivered through Instacart and other means, but should people be so worried about going grocery shopping and washing the outside of their the whole thing that
Right.
you know.
I'd say 2 things. If you are in any way so remember, we said advanced age, right? So let's say over the age of 70 or multiple medical comorbidities. So the high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, right? All of these areas. If you've got either one of those, you should be a little bit more sensitive, a little bit more aware of what you are doing. One of my friends, the other day asked me, he said, hey, what are you and your family doing to protect from coronavirus? And I said, we're doing the same things we've always done to protect against upper respiratory illnesses, which is get good sleep, eat excellent food, get our exercise, keep our respiratory systems solid and well, et cetera. And sure, maybe we're making sure the zinc, the selenium, the B vitamins, magnesium in our food is, get a little richer area there, get a few more mushrooms, et cetera. But otherwise, we are wonderfully set up to address this and are very low risk overall. Now, if I was, let's say, 85 and right, as I hope one day I will be, with the same, mentality, et cetera, I might say, I'm going to wear a mask when I go to the store. Why? Just because, because I want to reduce my exposure to these things. But like we said a minute ago, if you're anxious, if you're fearful, if you're concerned, and you don't want to go to the store, get it delivered to you, right? That's easy. That's fine. Or if you have a friend that you trust who's super healthy and all the rest, have them go pick the food up for you and bring it back to your house. You don't necessarily have to jump right in to kind of say, well, doctor, I said there's nothing to be scared of and I need to go. That's not what I said. I said that again, the more risk factors you have, the more you should be concerned about this. The lower the risk factors you have, the less concerned you should be about this. And the more risk factors you have, the more you should be doing what Chef AJ keeps saying to do, right? So you can reduce those risk factors and then you can be less concerned.
Right. A lot of people are saying they can't do it now because they're so stressed. It's like that old, what's that thing like? I can't get a show on Broadway till I have a show on Broadway.
Right.
I
Well,
can't.
right. People have said to me on the internet when I was doing these Instagram and Facebook posts and all this, they'd be like, Dr. Esser, this is not the time to talk about nutrition. And I'm like, what do you think this is the time for? Like hide in a bunker somewhere and like breathe my own recirculated air? Like again, folks, this is not smallpox. This does not have a mortality of 50% and people are dying left and right and all that. That's not it at all. This is the time to talk about nutrition. And when, actually, should you ask, when is the time to talk about nutrition? The time to talk about nutrition is anytime you're eating. If you've got food on your fork and you put it in your mouth, it's time to talk about nutrition. Let me explain that, right? So if the tiger is chasing you through the woods, are you eating? No, you're just trying to survive, right? If a bad man is breaking into your house and trying to steal your wife and children, are you eating? Hopefully not, right? You're addressing the bad man. Right now, coronavirus is not knocking on your door and chasing you through your house. So as a result, you have the time, you should make the composure, right? And you should make the decisions and think about what you're eating. That's all. Eat the food that loves you back. Eat the food that gives you the health that you want. Eat the food that enhances your immune system. Eat the food that will help keep you from dying or ending up in a doctor's office from all the other diseases that we know it radically reduces the risk of, the high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, et cetera. Because again, it's so crucial we come back to this. Every 37 seconds in America, someone's dying of a heart attack. If you are worried about your health, that is what you should be worried about right now. So put down the steak fillet, put down the Dairy Queen garbage. I heard these commercials, McDonald's is open. Well, that's a shame. I wish they weren't, right? This is not the time for Mickey D's and Chick-fil-A and all this garbage. If you need some dopamine, this is the time for prayer. Quiet, just relax. This is time for meditation. This is a time for gentle music. This is a time for your significant other to give you a foot massage or for you to give them one. This is the time to pull out some books that you've been loving to read or you remember from years ago that gave you such joy. This is the time to get your exercise. That's right. This is the time for you to do some little art projects. This is the time to feed your soul, right? So you can be, so you can get that dopamine from sources that love you back. Plus, don't forget those berries, those mangoes, those delicious dried fruits here and there give you wonderful sources of dopamine as well. So this nutritional program that Chef AJ and I are always talking about is not one of sitting in a dark little room, eating a little kale leaf by yourself and being lonely. This is a nutritional program of celebration and of delight. So make sure that you are waxing poetic about the blueberries that you're eating because they're in season right now and they're very yummy, right? And so make sure that you are still validating in your brain and your mind how wonderful these foods are and what a blessing they are to your body. Yeah.
And make sure you follow Dr. Esser Health on Instagram because he posts pictures of his food and it's very, very inspiring. I think, Dr. Esser, you're right about people not being so afraid of these other lifestyle diseases that ultimately will kill them. I think because they take a long time to develop, whereas with this virus or even other flus, it can happen more quickly.
Well, but that's what's interesting because again, if we look at the data, right, it's those very same long-term risk factors of chronic disease that increase your likelihood of dying now. So these little anecdotal stories that float around the internet of John was so-and-so and he was super healthy and suddenly he died. It's like, well, let's face it for a second. 1 in 3 Americans has high blood pressure. 1 in 6 has high cholesterol. 1 in 9 has diabetes. So the majority of Americans are sick, unwell, or as this phrase goes, fat, sick, and nearly dead. And if you look at the data out of Italy, 60% of Italians are hypertensive. Almost 100% of Italians that are over the age of 50 at some point smoked in their life. So COPD or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease is horrific. It's ravaged that whole nation. And so these are unwell people who are already unwell, who then get a respiratory illness that their body was not accustomed to, and then blah, 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 blah. And still the average age of death is what, in the 80s, 78 to 85. So again, this is not a disease of the healthy. This is a disease of the unwell. And so what we need to make sure we're focused on is this is not something that's going to jump on your back out of nowhere and kill you. So if you look at most of the stories, it kind of drives me nuts a little bit, as you can tell, that these little anecdotal stories, because when you actually bury down into them, you find out, well, they weren't actually that well. Like one of my friends said to me, look at this ER doctor. It's so sad because he didn't have enough PPE and he died of coronavirus. And I went in and Google searched him. The guy had had cancer twice and all these other things. He had a compromised immune system. He never should have been around upper respiratory illnesses to begin with, right? He should have been protecting himself and staying at home. So again, if you've got all of these disease processes, yeah, you should not be around something that can potentially impair your sort of respiratory system very rapidly. And that's not what you should be doing. So crucial, because remember, the foods that we eat right now are either upregulating or downregulating your immune system. There's some great ones I posted, for example, on blueberries, enhancing immune function in the setting of upper respiratory illnesses. There are a bunch of them we put on there if you look on just even the common flu, that, for example, pregnant women who consume the most fruits and vegetables have the lower rates, moderate reduction in all of the risk of common flu, right? So this is crucial stuff we should be talking about, not to mention what else you are putting in. So there is data, very clear data. I put it on Instagram and Facebook, and look at the studies that shows that the use of anti-inflammatory medications impairs your body's initial immune response, plus impairs antibody production. This is crucial stuff. So what you're putting in your mouth radically matters about your risk of disease now and long term.
You know, this is Sunday and churches are not allowed to meet anymore, but you're so inspiring. Maybe you'll just talk to us every Sunday and get us through this. It's amazing. Sunny says, I've been dealing with plantar fasciitis and I'm having a really hard time walking, which gives me sanity during these times. Dr. Esser, do you have any recommendations to deal with this issue? And Judy says she had a PRP done and she hasn't had it anymore.
Very nice. Yeah, I use PRP frequently for treatment of plantar fasciitis, but the simple things is where we should start always, right? So number one is make sure you're stretching your big toe out. You're getting on the bottom of your foot. You're stretching your Achilles tendons out, right? The classic calf stretch. You should be doing some nice icing on the bottom of the foot three times per day, maybe a little arnica gel down there. Get a good heel cup, a gel heel cup that helps offload that area a bit. And then also, right, if you have somebody at home who can massage the bottom of your feet a little bit for you, it'd be great. But so stretching out your Achilles, stretching out your big toe, bringing it up and keeping good flexibility on the plantar fascial surface, decreasing compression with a gel heel cup, and then getting some nice myofascial massage on the bottom. Those are all the first places to start. Now in Florida, a lot of the PT places are wide open. So I don't know about the rest of the country, but if you want to go into a PT, they can do what's called ASTIM, or instrument assisted soft tissue mobilization, where they scrape down to the bottom of the foot and that increases blood flow and helps there as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Here in California, there's no non-essential medical services. No
Right.
doctors are seeing patients, at least to
Yeah.
my knowledge.
Wow.
Heidi wants to know if you can do telemedicine if she's in California.
I don't know. It would depend on her insurance, et cetera. So we'd have to look into that.
Right. But if somebody would be willing to pay for it, you could give a
Yeah, of
consult,
course.
right?
Yeah, always. Yeah.
And
Happy to help.
who would they contact?
Probably the best place would be my esserhealth.com website. And again, right now I'm very busy in clinic, every day, seeing 30 some patients or so. So, try to reach out where I can, and we could try to have my team coordinate things if we need to.
Nice. You might have answered this, but I just want to read it since she posted. Jan says, how does being on blood pressure medicine affect COVID? It's obviously if they're on blood pressure medicine, they have a pre-existing thing that's going to make them more vulnerable, right?
They do, and the physiologic aspect of this is a little unclear. Part of it is likely that, first of all, elevated blood pressure is a sign of chronic inflammation in the body, right? And so those endothelia, which are those little tiny cells that line your arteries, they're dysfunctional. And as a result, they're not able to relax and open up as well. And so you want to remember that sign of endothelial dysfunction, what blood pressure is, really influences all the blood vessels everywhere, including in your lungs. In addition, you want to remember, here's your heart, it pumps, and when it pumps blood out. But that blood first goes to the lungs, then it comes back to the heart, then it gets pumped out to the body, then it comes back up and goes back to the heart. Well, if there's increased pressure that the heart is pumping against, then some of that blood is going to back up into your lung space. And here is where we get a little bit of this lymphatic congestion that occurs. When you get lymphatic congestion, you're going to get a little increased fluid that just sits in your lungs, a small amount that may not even be picked up by an X-ray or other tests we do. But that slightly increased congestion in combination with a little increased inflammation would theoretically be why an individual who has elevated blood pressure may be at higher risk of more a severe sort of coronavirus case. But that's all theoretical because we don't have good data at this point on it. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank
But
you.
don't forget, in 3 weeks of doing an aggressive plant-based program, 80% of people can be off their blood pressure meds. Over 100 studies published by the Pritikin Institute, right, in the peer-reviewed literature, Dean Ornish's work, Caldwell Esselstyn's work, et cetera. My nutritional detox that's online or will be online in 5-7 days. It's a 4-week thing, same thing. In 3 weeks, 80% of my patients are off blood pressure meds. So again, it's not that this is a disease that takes months and months and years to reverse. For the majority of people, it can be radical, and it starts with each bite. Remember that study I love so much out of Johns Hopkins? They've done dozens of them, feeding people with no blood pressure issues a single high-fat, high-cholesterol meal. And for 4 hours afterwards, their blood flow through the brachial artery in the arm is decreased by 50%. 50%, that's huge. So that's 4 hours. So, you have the high fat meal for breakfast, the high fat for lunch, the high fat for dinner, you're obstructed all day long. And so that's what drives that blood pressure up as well. And they did studies at Johns Hopkins also that showed you ate spinach, you ate blueberries, etc., blood vessels dilate open, which is a beautiful thing. Immediately, one meal.
That's amazing. Violet wants to know if you've been plant-based since you've been a toddler.
No, I've been plant-based since I was in utero, even better, since I was in my mother's stomach. So my great-grandfather had some health conditions, and he was originally from Germany, and they lived in Pittsburgh, and he was a tailor, Esser Brothers Costumes. They made costumes for the high-end shows and theater in Pittsburgh. And anyway, he started doing research, and he was reading the works of Trawl, and he was reading the works of the different early plant-based nutritional guys. And he was like, wow, I need to do this. And so he started eating fruits and vegetables. He moved his family outside of the city a little bit and grew all kinds of trees on the property and had them exercising every day. And lo and behold, he felt much better. And so as a result, then my grandfather, then my father, and myself, et cetera. So kind of multiple generations. So yes.
That's amazing. So this is going so fast. I missed who said it, but the question was, can we really reverse the damage that we've done to our bodies by eating unhealthfully all these years?
The evidence is overwhelming that when you make radical changes for the majority of people, for the majority of chronic cardiometabolic disease, this is going to be your high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart disease, diabetes, etc., you can radically reverse or radically alter the physiologic aspects in your body. So for example, right, you may have eaten horrific your whole life. And at this point, you've learned from Chef AJ, from myself, from others, that it's time to make changes. So you start making those changes. Well, let's say you've got pretty significant clogging up of your arteries, this atherosclerosis, which we know, by the way, 80% of people by the age of 18 in America have fatty streaks in the early beginnings of heart disease. So yes, you have heart disease if you've eaten the standard American diet. Can you reverse all of that hardening, et cetera? No. But can you get normal blood pressures with normal physiology and normal function? Yes. So just like we can't necessarily reverse some wrinkles and gray hairs, et cetera. Well, maybe the gray hair we can a little bit with dye, but the wrinkles, right? So much, but we can maximize our health today, right? So that's what's crucial and essential you remember. Yeah, because some people, they get tied into this a little bit. They go, oh, I wish I would have known 30 years ago. I have patients all the time. I just wish I would have met you 20 years ago. And I go, stop, you met me last week. That's what matters. So now's the time. Because why? Because if we spend all of our time thinking about the past, very frequently, it's almost like we've got chains on our ankles, and it keeps us from moving forward in that direction because we're still beating ourselves up. Oh, I remember I had this friend, Jenny, and she kept trying to get me to do this, and I never would. Well, how's that helpful? Whatever. Call Jenny up and say, hey, girl, guess what? I'm finally doing what you said, and I'm feeling amazing. Not, I wish I would have, because that's not a healthy space cognitively, emotionally to be in, rather than, look at me now, I'm doing it, and I'm so excited moving forward. Yeah.
Nice. So if I don't get to your question, it's not because I don't like you. This goes so fast and there's so many, and he's so popular, maybe he'll come back and
You're not going to get to my question, Chef AJ.
I'm trying, but when I'm watching this chat, it goes really quickly. So Judy says, even if somebody was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, could a radical change help even then? Do little changes even help?
Cancer is really tough because you want to remember, cancer is where your cells have begun to incorrectly multiply. Something at the cellular level got turned on, or some stopgap that should have stopped growth of your cells got turned off. And so this cell is now just going rapidly growing and now spreading to places it shouldn't be. So what do we want to do? We want to make your body as anti-cancer as possible. And certainly for the majority of cancers, going with a plant-based program, especially all the hormonal cancers. This is your classic colon cancer, breast cancer, uterine cancer, cervical cancer, prostate cancer, etc. These appear to get a very positive response overall with regards to mortality, likelihood of death, and morbidity, the side effects of all of the treatments, et cetera. But there are other cancers that do not seem to respond particularly well to plant-based approaches, meaning they don't just suddenly magically go away. And that's unfortunate, but that is what most of the data would suggest. So this is where my point is. There are other toxins in our environment, and there are things where the train is going down the tracks very rapidly that sometimes we cannot fully pull it back. But what can we do? We can reduce inflammation. We can improve overall function. We can feed the nerves so that the effects of the chemotherapy is less severe, right? We can improve overall respiratory function through gentle exercise and excellent nutrition, so on and so forth. So still, the benefits of a micronutrient dense program are still there, even if at the end of the day, we don't reverse that disease. So, because you want to remember, all those other diseases are still there in the body, right? The high blood pressure, the heart disease, the type 2 diabetes building up in many individuals, the chronic inflammation from excess weight gain, etc. So this is not, don't take me wrong here. This is not saying this is a quote panacea for every single thing under the sun and you will never die. So again, having been in this community for now decades, and now I'm in my 4th plus decade in this community, I will tell you that's where things can get a little awry. Where people, like when my grandfather died, people went, I could just hear it, oh, see, he died. And I was like, what's your point? Of course he died. Whether it's now or whether it's when he was 120, he's still gonna die. Well, you need to remember, our goal is not just length of years, right? It's the life in those years. It's the vibrancy of those years. And so this should not be about relativism or nihilism. It's about fact and science and truth. The human person is intended for micronutrient plant-based foods the majority of the time. All physiologic data shows it. All interventional studies show this. It is outrageous to think otherwise. But we're not meant to be here forever. And that is why it's so crucial that when we are here, we're treating those around us with love, with compassion, with empathy, and trying to leave this world a better place.
Wow. Well, gosh, you are just so inspiring. I'm serious. You should come on every day. You're really making people feel better. And,
Good.
they can't see how tall you are right now, but you're really, really tall and you're in really great physical shape. You were like a pro tennis player too, even though you've been vegan since birth. And obviously, how could you have gotten your protein to grow as tall as you did,
That is right. I'm 6'5" tall, and I played on the low tour for a while, and had a lot of fun, and so, yes.
And Jill wants to know what percentage of your diet is uncooked fruits and vegetables.
I'd say 80 to 90%. I mean, the majority of what I eat is going to be bright, colorful stuff.
I think she's meaning cooked versus raw.
So I'd say 80+%, if not more, is all raw fruits and vegetables, et cetera.
Really? I did not know that.
20%, yeah, about 20% is probably, cooked. I guess if you went purely based on total calories, then the cooked food probably gives me more total calories, right? Because whether it be my oatmeal or whether it be the rice and the beans, et cetera. But often, what I put on, for example, Instagram or Facebook, that's my first plate. So, sometimes there'll be second and third plates, or there may have been a first plate, like for example, my salads. I really like, just like Chef AJ, to eat as much as I can get of that stuff. What I do struggle with, right, which is a real problem, is when I'm at work, right, is getting enough total calories from non-cooked foods, right? And that's just because the amount of time it takes me to chew up those veggies. And it does take time, hands down. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't, here's what I'm very detail oriented when it comes to statistics and medical studies and things like that. When it comes to my nutrition, I'm extremely, hey, eat fruits, vegetables, beans, rice, seeds, et cetera. And the majority of it, let it be, micronutrient rich, minimally processed, and then go from there. But I'm not looking for specific exact percentage every day, because I don't think there's good data for that,
Right.
But the majority of what we should eat, right? And it should be based on what your goals are, right? So as a tall, slender guy who likes to work out in the morning, plus in the evening with the kiddos, plus during the day, I'm running all over the place. And as you can tell, I'm a little high energy. I need more calories. And so if I eat nothing but a salad 3 times a day, that won't do it for me, because I just get too scrawny. And my wife goes, oh, you're bony, you're too bony. So, there's that as well. So you need to be aware, what are your disease processes, so on and so forth. What are your personal goals? And then create the nutritional program to meet those.
Right. Vicky says she's getting a rush of dopamine just from listening to you. And Sue has a question. Can you talk about vaccination? Should every person get the flu vaccines like we are told? And there was another question. If they do develop a corona vaccine, should it be mandatory? Or if it's, I mean,
These are great and very challenging questions. And I say those, why? Well, because the vaccination topic is fraught with extreme heightened emotions, right, et cetera. And when you say anything about vaccines, you can quickly become anathema to people. So what I will tell you about the flu vaccine, I will tell you that the flu vaccine itself every year, right, is based upon what the most common flus were the year or two or three before. It is not about what the flu will look like this given year. And that is problematic to me, right? Because as a medication, we would want our medications to be really geared toward what the disease process itself is that given year. Because otherwise, you're exposing yourself to the risk without necessarily the benefit. You want to remember how vaccines are meant to work, right? You're taking some substance, usually a heat-killed viral particle. You are combining it with an alcohol substrate, fluid, along with some form of something that pisses off your immune system, quite simply. These substances in the past have been heavy metals. They've been other various kind of toxins that when you inject them through the skin, your body does not like it. It creates this upregulation of the immune system. It finds the antibodies in response and then begins to create antibodies, right? A level of protection to it, which is interesting because it's in kind of an odd way of getting immunity. You want to remember the majority of your immune system is actually developed through your nasopharyngeal tract. So either through your nose or through your mouth, things get into your intestines, and there they are processed through stomach acid, through protein, enzymes from your pancreas. Then they are brought to the surface of your intestinal tract, where they are brought through the microvilli, through the little cell walls, and then they are exposed to what are called M cells. These little cells are in your GALT, your gut-associated lymphatic tissue, which are little colonies of your immune system. Really, 85% of your immune system actually lines your intestinal tract. That's where it lives. So as a result, these little M cells take in the virus or bacteria that's in your gut, they expose it to your immune system, which then creates an immune response, and then you get antibody production and immunity. So we bypass that when we go through the skin. Very interesting. Not sure why we've chosen to do vaccines through the skin versus oral route as a common way to do it. But nevertheless, I do not personally encourage people to get flu vaccines every year because of the risk without necessarily the reward. So what are the risks? Well, obviously, these are toxins put into your body. When I worked at Harvard and I'd be on various ICUs for the neurointensive care, we'd have people come in with something called Guillain-Barré, which is a demyelinating disorder of your nerves. It means your nerves start breaking down radically from your own immune system. And it was related very frequently to the use of various vaccines like the flu vaccine yearly. So again, it's very low risk of that happening. But if my risk of the flu is extremely low, and this is, then it becomes, well, where's my benefit? So I tell everybody they should make personal decisions on what vaccines to get. As far as corona vaccine, no, I would not encourage people to get it when it comes out. Why? Because it will have zero testing of any merit. Because the true testing of a drug is in phase 3 and phase 4 data. It is not, so let's say I come up with a drug and I give it to 100 people and they take it for 2 months. And I go, see, it's safe. Nobody died. Nobody had any other things. But if this is a drug that's going to be in their body for months, like 12 months or years, or they're going to take it every day, I have no idea what the repercussions are, right? So that's the concern. So if somebody comes up with a coronavirus vaccine and we have 5 months of testing of it, does that really tell you what's going to happen to their body long term? Of course not. So first of all, we need to know how serious and how dangerous is the coronavirus. And as we're seeing right now, more and more studies coming out showing, there was just one in Germany that showed 33% of the population of this entire city all already had antibodies, and yet very few people were sick. So again, they were developing what we call herd immunity, which is so essential. So if the disease process is really scary and really dangerous, we should be thinking about vaccines, et cetera, to give people herd immunity. If the disease process is not that dangerous for the majority of people, we should get herd immunity through natural exposure to those who are at lowest risk. So as some epidemiologists would suggest the coronavirus, the children should be out getting it, sharing it amongst themselves, then the next level, right, of healthy people, so on and so forth. And all the sick, unwell, and those over the age of 75 should be hidden inside for weeks. Let the rest of the community get herd immunity, and now begin to slowly bring people back out, little by little, those are at the highest risk. And that may be what we end up recommending in the future, because remember, we had SIRS, we had SARS, we had MERS, we have all these, we have now, this coronavirus, this will not be the end of these various kinds of viral exposures. So they're going to continue to come down the track, which is why it's so essential that you don't get sucked in right now and think, oh, when it's just over, oh, when it just goes away. Why? Because you're exposed to thousands of viruses every year, and they're only going to be more over time, that may be more or less virulent over time. And so it's essential that your immune system is as healthy as it can be, and you're following appropriate hygienic measures, as we all should. I mean, guys are horrific on hygiene. Let's just be honest about this, right? There was just a study on guys, how many of them wash their hands after they pee? And there was like 70% didn't. It's like, oh, come on. What are you, like some sort of Neanderthal? Wash your hands. I mean, I'm in men's bathrooms all the time and I see it. And I always want to be like, I saw that. Get back in here. But it's just like,
I've noticed that too. What's interesting is where I live, there's a lot of construction, and they have the porta potty,
of course,
but they never have a
right.
place to wash their hands. But
Right.
It wasn't until the coronavirus happened that the porta potties are now having hand washing stands. And that
Right.
wasn't until now. And you're absolutely right.
Right.
Men do not wash their hands.
Shame on you, men.
That's right. Absolutely.
But really, I mean, we should be finding that safe place. We should be finding that reasonable place. We should be finding that science-based place, which says, follow excellent hygiene, follow excellent nutrition, so on and so forth. And when something's really dangerous, et cetera, let's come up with the right medical treatments for it, right? This is not either or. And I think that's important. I don't ever want people to leave thinking that Dr. Esser is saying, never ever have this or that. No, this is about reason-based approach to your health. And there was a great quote, I can't remember it exactly, but it's something to the effect of, we need to always educate patients on the amazing potential of medical interventions, as well as on their incredible limitations. That's very important, because you want to remember, the fourth leading cause of death in America are medical interventions. So you can Google search that, you'll find it, right? Whether it be drugs, whether it be surgeries, whether it be somebody got too much breathing gas and they knocked out in the middle of their surgery. This is real stuff, right? So drugs, interventions, et cetera, don't come without risk, but they have their place, right? So like when I broke this finger, here, I didn't say, give me a glass of green juice and let me go home. I said, the bone's sticking through the skin. Who can fix this, baby, right? And 6 screws later, right, I've got a finger I can use. So we want to use medicine where it's appropriate, but also not overlook the simple lifestyle interventions that are the foundation for your health.
Absolutely. I can't think of anything better to say. I just want to wish Denise, who's watching, a recovery. She has this, and she's mentioning that even though she was whole food plant-based, she had a very stressful lifestyle. So again, that's what Dr. Esser is saying. We've got to get rid of the stress. We got to get rid of the crap. We got to.
Yes. The human body, again, this is, I think some people make the mistake too, right? Don't they? I've seen people over the, again, decades I've been in this, who are extraordinarily high stress and extremely paranoid and extremely anxious, or in marriages that are falling apart, jobs they hate, et cetera. And they're like, I'm just eating plants, but I'm so unhealthy and I have this and this skin condition and this issue and that issue. It's like, your body is obviously not well right now. And so the food itself is not enough for you. And you need more of these other aspects. I mean, even for myself, I had some miserable, I don't know, some viral who knows what last year. And some people say, well, yeah, maybe last year, what was a thicker than usual flu season may have already been the coronavirus for people in November, December, et cetera. But when I go back and I look at where my life was, I was burning the candle at 5 ends. I was not sleeping. I was not caring for myself, et cetera. I was eating well. I was eating healthy nutrients, but that was it. And that's not enough. It's got to be the whole package, the whole person, addressing it all.
Right. Well, guys, Dr. Esser is here to sell you nothing. He just wants you to be healthy. So please go over to the Facebook link that I just posted so you can follow him on Facebook, and go to, if you're on Instagram, Esser Health. Robin says she's so glad you said that was your first plate, because she worried that you weren't eating enough food. So that's amazing. I want to respect Dr. Esser's time. There were lots more questions on shin splints, scoliosis, back pain, orthotics, HRT. Maybe Dr. Esser will come back. And yeah, you're great. Thank you. You've really helped people, and you're just such a calm presence.
Well, it's a pleasure to be on with you, Chef AJ, and I always want to thank you for all the work that you do to kind of transform lives, as what you're doing. And I think all of us together have so much power. And I just want you to, maybe close your eyes for a minute, just take a couple deep breaths, all of you out there listening, and just get back to what you can do. Stop thinking about the fear, the anxiety, the hysteria, et cetera. It's not helping you. It won't change necessarily what you're doing for a positive, but instead really get back to focusing on what you can do, you're able to do. Keep developing those social circles of positive people in your life, whether it be on the phone or the internet and Zoom calls, et cetera. And just make sure that you're really setting yourself up for success, and just really embracing every day, because again, the car accident could get you tomorrow. So you want to make sure that today you're embracing those that are, whether even if we're talking about like a non-physical embrace, but embracing the people around you and in your life and your circles of influence and love and compassion, empathy, and joy.
Well,
So
man, if this doctor thing doesn't work out, I think a minister would be like the perfect job for you. We have so many hearts for you. People love you. They're blessing you, and they want you to
thank
come
you.
back. And if you guys have like specific medical stuff, please consider going to Esser Health and seeing if you can have a consult, because it's kind of hard. There was just so many people watching. I'm so sorry if I couldn't get to your the question, but come back in 2 hours when I'll be talking to Dr. Frank Sabatino, another one of
He's awesome.
yeah, and maybe we can get your questions answered there. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Esser, and I appreciate everything you have to say, and I appreciate you very much as well. And I'm sorry we didn't get together in Florida, but like they say,
Soon.
next year in Jerusalem.
There you go. Nice
All
to
right,
see you.
take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.